Hey, good morning, good afternoon. I'm happy to have everybody on the Growth Factory, episode 2 today, talking about the Solo Ager with David Treece. David and I work a lot together, and we always run over our meetings. We put a 30-minute on there, and it goes 45 minutes because David has the best stories of all the good that he's doing in this community, and I just can't wait to kind of get started and kind of jump in with David. Before we do that, I want to kind of introduce him real quick. Again, he's doing so much in his community on the Solo Ager, so I just wanted to kind of read through this, get to know him a little bit, and then we'll kind of dive in and kind of get to know David a little bit. So David Treece is the president of Treece Financial Group, which is headquartered in Miami, Florida. David has over 30 years of experience as a consumer-oriented advocate who provides planning services above and beyond, definitely, the financial realm to enhance the well-being of his clients and their loved ones. At the forefront of his work is navigating the sometimes complex financial and healthcare needs of individuals who are aging alone, oftentimes without a strong support network. At a time when many are vulnerable due to changes in health or living situations, having a trusted advocate on their side makes a life-changing difference. David and his team work closely with estate planning attorneys, accountants, and aging and caregiving specialists, including geriatric care managers, senior concierge services, senior housing professionals, assisted living facilities, senior move professionals, and others. At the end, we'll flash up the QR code. You can get access to his website, but you can learn more at treecefinancial.com. David.
Great to be here.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. You know how I feel about the Solo Ager and all that you're doing in your community, and I'm so happy that you're able to kind of take the time out of your busy schedule to sit down at the Growth Factory and just kind of learn or teach the folks here what this is all about.
It's so interesting because when people think about sometimes like niches and working in niche marketing, they usually don't think about a group like Solo Agers. And we've been doing this for years. And I have to say it's kind of grown organically because it's just an increasing demographic. And I've discovered that I have people working with me, sometimes couples with no kids, and they want this relationship. And often it's one person who's afraid that what's going to happen to the spouse who's left behind. And then there are just so many people who fall into this demographic of people who are aging alone or at risk of aging alone. Again, it's like for maybe a couple who didn't have any kids, or there's a handicapped child or an estranged child, or the children are far away. But I have quite a few people who fall into this category, and it's become a competitive advantage, actually. But it's also part of our DNA. It's what we want to do to help people. But it's been very interesting to get the reaction of people who want to work with us because we have that focus on people who are aging alone or at risk of aging alone.
Well, you've trademarked the term, the Solo Ager. You came up with that term, and you like I said, you trademarked it. You kind of already kind of jumped in a little bit, which is great. But tell me about this Solo Ager group. Tell me a little bit about them, and how did you start working with them?
It's interesting that we did trademark that term, and part of it was we finally decided that since we were doing all of this work, that we would try to organize it. And so we have a section on our website for Solo Agers and information there. And but there are a few other terms and things that we've been marketing around. And that's, again, it's because there is a demand for that. There are a lot of people who know, and they ask themselves the question, it's like, who's going to take care of me when I'm older? And I think a lot of financial advisors have actually had this situation or have this with existing clients, and they don't really know how to respond. For example, I have had people who are, when I say alone, I mean, by definition, somebody who has no spouse, no kids, no other close relatives, basically nobody there. For example, if they're supposed to get their legal documents done and a power of attorney, they struggle to say, well, who's going to be my power of attorney? And often attorneys will say, they are asked to be that person, to be the executor, to be the power of attorney. The vast majority of attorneys do not want to do that unless there's a strong personal relationship. It's generally not what they want to do. And there hasn't been a good answer for that. And at Cetera Advisors, we have a trust company, Dunham Trust, so we can actually name a trust company to do a lot of this work. But that's really what got us started, is to see the need that, and there are just so many different needs from this demographic. One of the things is there are a lot of people who never got married, or they are married and never had kids. A lot of professional women who fall into that category, or they could be widowed, divorced. There is this gray divorce where people end up being alone. I am a gay man, so I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and we see this certainly in our community. There are a lot of older people who never had children, and even if they're part of a couple, there is a big risk of aging alone, and there's just tons of issues there that we can help with as financial advisors. And I think that this demographic is growing, that as people age, we're finding that there are a lot of people who just never had kids, or certainly it's not just the services for people who are solo agers. It could be used for a lot of people who are just aging, whether just they don't want their kids necessarily to be in that position of helping them too much, maybe just coordinating even from a long distance.
Wow. Yeah. But being in your community and working with folks who are kind of looking for that support network and not able to find them, and then here you are, and they really working with you, and they just kind of open up to you about their situation, and you're able to help them. And just coming from a place of giving and helpfulness, you've just learned organically, right? Just of all the, going back to the bio, all those different types of organizations that you work with. How did you learn how to do this?
It's interesting. Again, we've done it kind of organically. I remember my light bulb moment was when I had somebody in the office who had a long-term care policy. We had nothing to do with it, but he was asking me, now, how does this work? What have I bought here? And this is somebody who was aging alone. And I said, well, the way it works is if you cannot do 2 activities of daily living, which is basically, feeding yourself, toileting, transferring, continence, these kinds of things, dressing yourself, or if you have a cognitive impairment, then you can hire somebody to help you and file a claim to get those expenses generally reimbursed. And then the light bulb went off thinking about this person. I said, if you're in that shape, that you have a cognitive impairment, or you really cannot do 2 activities of daily living where you could file a claim, you're probably not even in a position to even file the claim, to know what the policy is. And so we've actually been in that position where we have helped people file claims. And I've been on the phone. One of my best clients, her husband has serious cognitive impairment, and we were on the phone a long time getting the claim process started, so that and once that happens, of course, that's a lot of money that can come into a household from those the payments, and the premiums can be expensive, and generally the premiums stop. But there are just so many situations that we've come across where people are having struggles by being alone. We've had people who fall. In fact, I've always said the people I worry about the most are my solo agers. And one thing about that term, I used to say privately, like, these are my alones, the people who are alone, and it's kind of down and depressing, and I wouldn't say that. Oh, you're alone. So and there's another term. It's almost a medical term. I think it is actually recognized, where they call them elder orphans, which also I don't like. It's like, okay, you're older and you're alone, like an orphan. And so we use this term solo ager, and it's positive. And that's one of our big messages, is that if you are aging alone, we want to help you take the fear away of who's going to take care of you when you're older and alone. And that's all the services that we've put together. And we're being trained in the financial services industry to recognize that, certain problems, if there's cognitive impairment, if there's potential fraud. And again, that could be from a distant relative, a caregiver, just somebody who's out to take advantage of somebody who's older and vulnerable. And we have seen all of that. And so again, this over the years, to get back to your question, we've developed all of these professional contacts that we've used over and over again, So we have a Solo Ager section on our website, and we also have all of these referral partners. And it's amazing the services that are out there for anybody who's aging, but particularly people who need these services because nobody else is there to provide them. And if you give it a moment's thought, if you haven't thought about it before, we've had somebody who said, I've got to go in for a colonoscopy, and somebody has to be there for me to drop me off, stay with me, and then bring me home. It's not just taking a taxi or an Uber. Well, we have services, concierge services, who will do that, and we have used them. I have somebody who had to go in for cataract surgery, and the husband was just not in a position to do anything, and in fact, really shouldn't have been left alone. And so we'll set up an appointment, and somebody will take you there and be there and then bring you home and make sure that everything is fine when you get back. We had a client who, in fact, I talked about fraud. That's one of my biggest concerns. I had a case of an elderly client who started requesting large withdrawals, and I got suspicious. And I went to visit her in her home, and she says, I know you're going to talk me out of this, but I've won a ton of money, and I've got to pay fees and taxes and transfers, payments, and all this. And I thought, oh no. And one of the things we've learned is to make contact as much as possible with the family when we're starting to work with older people. And this was a woman who, no kids, the husband passed away, and only distant relatives, a brother up north and a cousin, and those people were wonderful. But if we think fraud is going on, of course, we can now report it and get accounts frozen. And this was a long time ago, before we had all of this. And I decided that, I was not going to facilitate this, because I found out she was the victim of one of these lottery scams in Jamaica. And so I'm working with everybody, all the authorities. I called the police, I called the FBI, I called because they were like pretending to be FBI agents. I called our Department of Children and Families, Adult Protective Services. They sent out inspectors even, and nobody did anything. And I see, because of course, the clients always have access to their money. They contact the custodian, and that's what she started doing rather than going through me. And I could see the money going out. And finally, all of the professional advice I was getting was that she needed a guardian. And so, that's something to be avoided at all costs, because of the expenses, and there's abuse involved there too. But the idea was to make sure that the accounts are sealed, and so that somebody is in charge. Another service that we've discovered is there are professional bill paying services that are licensed, insured, bonded. And there's one of them where literally there are municipalities that will hire them. This one company they're also in Florida, but they're headquartered in New York. The city of New York hires them to work with elderly people to make sure that their bills are paid. It's not a question of running out of money. It's literally the physical capacity to write a check or to set this up. And so people were getting cars repossessed or the heat turned off, and it was a mechanical issue. And so that becomes a burden on the municipality. And so they've hired these companies it's like social work. But these are for-profit companies. And then they will come in, they will make sure that the bills are paid. And if there is another relative someplace else, they can be copied on everything. So you've got, eyes and ears on the accounts. I had somebody else who was the victim of fraud, where he bought something for thousands of dollars, some rudimentary website, and he was supposed to make a commission on anybody who shopped on that website. I'm like, don't do this. And it turned out that we got all of the money back. What happened there, though, that was a story that was featured on PBS's nightly business report. And it's only when the reporter called that company finally said, oh, no, we'll give him all his money back. And they sent three $3,000 money orders, because he paid $9,000 for this ridiculous website, never made a penny. And it was basically, a scam. The same with that, the lottery scam, that was the lead story on the local news here in Miami a couple nights in a row. And yeah, I actually had the media in my office, and I said, this is what's going on and how we're trying to stop it. And it's just always an issue with people who are aging alone. And even if they're doing it themselves, they get a ton of solicitations for donations. And I try to train them. I give them the verbiage: just don't answer the phone or hang up. And you try to control it. Of course, now there are all these services. There are more and more services. And of course, they do have to be able to afford it. It has nothing directly to do with us. But we have these referral partners, and we've developed these relationships over the years. I had one of my clients who spent the night on the floor, and it was horrifying to find out about this, that he fell, he could not get up, they didn't have one of those alarms. And so when I found out about it, he says, I've got to get out of here. I can't stay in this apartment. There are services that will help people find assisted living, nursing homes. They're basically like real estate agents, where they get a commission maybe if they place somebody there, but there are good ones in local communities that will take somebody around based on their budget or what they're looking for. And so we've had services like that. We have another service that we're currently using actually for somebody who is a senior move manager. You can actually get accredited in this area. And if you think about it, you've got somebody who knows that they need to downsize, and they may have a lifetime worth of stuff in their apartment, their house, and they are alone. And how do you get rid of it? Yeah, I went through this actually personally with my brother. I had a handicapped brother who has since passed away, and he was paranoid schizophrenic, and he was diagnosed around age 20. And then when our parents passed away, he'd always lived with our parents, he became my responsibility. That's another way I learned about all of this. It's like, okay, you think somebody's in trouble and they live away. Well, you can call the police and they'll do a wellness check. And I had that situation a few times, and the police called me on my cell, and they're checking on my brother. And then he started to deteriorate, and I had to get him into an assisted living facility. And then I had to bring him closer to me and deal with all the legal documents. So I was the power of attorney. I had to make those decisions. But he was on a feeding tube at one time. He was on a ventilator. And I mean, you need to know to get those documents done. And until you've been through it, and you just have to make sure that that's done and you've got the right people. But then again, this is the issue. Who do you have if there's nobody? And that's where we try to get a trust company named, and we try to help. And we're trying to build a community, actually. But I started to talk about senior move managers there. My tangents have tangents, and I tell so many stories.
Well, you have so many stories to draw from. Yeah, and I love the stories. And I definitely want to hear about this move, because that's not something I had heard of before. Talk about that real quick, and then I want to ask you a couple more questions about just what advisors can do. But just talk about what is a move manager? Like, what do they do?
Yeah, they are specialists who not just moving, not a moving company exactly. These are people who know that you're moving to another home that is probably your forever or final home. And there's a lot of emotion there. And they are specialized so that they can go in and they can say, okay, you need this, 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 and this. And the rest of it, you will have to part with. And they will pack things up. And they tend to know a lot of the assisted living facilities. It even could be independent living or continuing care retirement communities. And so then they will bring all of that in and get it set up so that it is for your comfort and your safety. And that is a very emotional time to go through. We're finding that even in cases where there are kids, the kids don't want their parents' crap, all of the old china. And it's like, just let it go.
Yeah, the collectibles, right? Yeah.
It's collectibles, yes. It's like flotsam, jetsam, collectibles, whatever. So we deal with all of this. I had a client who Her husband passed away. They were wonderful people. She has since passed away. And when her husband passed away, she moved up to New Jersey with to be with her two daughters. But they had a house that had been lived in for decades. And she got a real estate agent. And then there's a deal to close on the house. And she's out of state. And the real estate agent calls me and says, you know, we've got to get this place empty in a week and a half. I have a specialist. I have somebody who I can call, and she's licensed, insured, bonded. She can go in, she can return medical equipment, she can help sell a property, she can get everything in storage, she can do a yard sale. She has a private contract, has nothing to do with us, but there's somebody there that I have, and she has done a phenomenal job time after time to help. And so a week and a half, we got this whole house emptied for sale. And when you can advertise that as an advisor, that you've got all of these contacts, light bulbs go off in those clients' heads. This is what I need. I'm saved. Somebody can help me. And then, of course, we try to put people in touch so that there's like a community. So you can, and even in the cases where there is an adult child, I call them ACAPs, adult children with aging parents. And the idea is, I hate the fact that everybody has to reinvent the wheel. If you are with an aging parent, you're not the first person to ever have an aging parent, yet for you, it's the first time. So you have to learn all of this. You have to have those conversations about taking the keys away from dad, or about, you know, have you done any legal documents? Are you planning to stay in the house? Are you planning to move? You know, what do you expect us to help you with? I mean, you have to learn all of that. And we're trying to create those resources to say, this is where you can go. And we've got guides to caregiving, guides to assisted living facilities, of course, guides to the legal documents. We try to help everybody with all of those things. It's a huge value-added service that we have.
That's a tremendous amount of information that you've collected over the years. And just to kind of step into like a community, though, would help if an advisor could tap into that community and say, like I said, they're not reinventing the wheel, right, for their clients, right? So the family members don't have to reinvent the wheel for their aging parents situation. And then if an advisor had access to your information and your thought leadership on this, they can immediately just really dive in and really create some really great value for those families that are kind of struggling. So what can advisors do different? Like, you know, clearly you have life experience and decades of experience of advocacy and helping folks, but say you got an advisor who goes, you know what, I have an aging client base. I'm not prepared to have those conversations, but these are my friends now. At this point, they become, you know, the clients become your friends over decades, and they, you know, you guys spend, you know, dinners together, and you know, you celebrate holidays together sometimes. So what could they do without having to go through all of the steps that maybe you've gone through? Is there a resource for them to tap into? Like, well, talk to them about that. What they can do.
You know, it's a great question. As I said, we've done this somewhat organically, but first of all, I love what you said about the fact that a lot of our truly become friends, especially after we try to have long, you know, term relationships, you know, lifelong relationships. And so we do have a lot of other clients, and I know that not everybody's interested in this. In fact, when we got started doing this, other advisors were like, we don't do that. We're not going to do that. And all they want is to manage money. Some more planning oriented. But I remember even that this woman who was in the lottery scam, I was asking other advisors, how do you handle a case like this? And many were saying, you don't need a client like that. Let her go, cut her loose. And it's like, oh, that was not, I tell you, I have had people where, you know, I had another couple where the husband was passing away, and twice this has happened, where he said, promise me you'll take care of her. And they said this to me privately, one-on-one, not in front of the wife. And it's that you take that seriously when that happens. And I have that. I haven't even shared that story with the surviving wives in those cases. But there's an obligation. I mean, this is one of the reasons I love what I do, but I realize not everybody wants to do it. I think the answer is really to try to find what resources are out there, and one resource will lead to another. There are a lot of aging resources out there, and you'll be surprised. I keep finding more and more and more. For example, I mentioned the bill paying service. I meant the senior move management, or finding assisted living facilities. I have another service that's basically like rent a grandchild. And the funny thing about it is there's a need for these things. For example, if somebody has some cognitive impairment and they can't be left alone because they may wander off or they could hurt themselves, they don't want a nurse's aide who's just present sitting there. It's almost like an invasion of privacy. And why are you here? And yet that's about the only service people can think of, is to get some sort of a nurse's aide there. Well, what you want is maybe a young person who's going to engage an adult like that. And it could be that they're going to drive them around, they're going to play games with them, they're going to, go to the movies, or, do something. And so there are services like that. And, often that can be paid for even through health insurance. So one of the things when I'm working with people who are aging alone, I want them to not have fear of having problems, where if we plan in advance, if we are in close contact, and if we can develop this network of other people in the same situation, we can make sure that they're taken care of. Now, the one issue I don't really have an answer for is if they really don't have a lot of resources, and it's like a social work case. And I have had that happen, where people come to me and they say, I've got this person. I had a retired judge come to me who I did not know. And my reputation was this. It's like, can you help this person? We're going to sell the house. And it's been incredibly flattering. That's happened to me many times. People will reach out to me. It's like, I know all the good work that you do to help older people. So, and obviously as advisors, there's only so much we can do. And as for practice management, we have to set boundaries. We have to have business reasons for doing things, as much as we may want to do pro bono. But my point on the podcast here is to say, this is a niche. It can be very profitable. It can be enormously rewarding. And it's something that I think is completely overlooked and underserved. And I hope advisors will consider thinking about this and developing the resources and marketing. This is like, I think sometimes people try to look at a niche, maybe a niche that they don't even belong to. And there's maybe it may even seem artificial. This is a niche that obviously, you don't belong to necessarily, solo aging, but this is a niche where you can really, really help people. And that's reason enough to do it.
Just a niche and just giving back. And
yes.
And trying to help people and getting referrals. If you want to talk about the actual business side of it, just getting referrals from families and meeting other people in the community who know you're there, like that judge you mentioned. Like he knows that you're really a great person in the community that's helping with this, and you can bring folks your way. And then just more foot traffic. I mean, that's not why you're doing it. But if you're talking to other advisors, like well, I don't want to do that, but yeah, it could work for you. You could, like you said, you can give back and still run the business without it. The pro bono work taking over and spiraling out of control. You still have a business reason in your community to do this. So I just think that's great. So look, people are going to want to know more. And so what I like to do is just go back to that. And if anybody wants to scan that code, I wanted to say thank you for coming on to the Growth Factory. I really appreciate it. You're super busy. And I love all your stories and hearing more about them. So if anybody on the podcast is supposed to scan that QR code and go to treecefinancial.com, you can learn more on that page. There's a link to the Solo Ager program and how it works, and some resources there. So David, just thanks again. I just really appreciate you, and looking forward to our next consulting call whenever that happens to be.
Yeah, and I appreciate being on the podcast. It's an honor and a pleasure. And anybody who's listening who if you want to reach out to me, don't hesitate to call or email. If I can help, I'm happy to do so.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Michael. All right, take care.